She actually died at work. Her body wasn't even cold. And they were saying, hey, move your stuff. My mother was the next of kin. She had to deal with going to move my sister's car because her employer said she had to move it or it was going to get towed. Look, I work almost every day. I have a thriving business even before YouTube. And here on YouTube, I've built 2 monetized channels and I'm currently working on a 3rd. I'm exhausted. And I still think hustle culture is a scam. Let me explain why I work like hell, but still reject hustle culture. Hi there, I'm Paige, and this is Nerdonomic, where we talk about geeky money topics and have a blast doing it. I often present as a contradiction to a lot of people. I love to work. I have a high work ethic, but I also think that we as Americans have a really toxic idea about work ethic and about money, and we aren't always sane about how we view these things. So I thought I would talk a little bit about hustle culture today. And before we get started on it, I wanted to make sure that we understand what I'm talking about when I say hustle culture. Hustle culture is a belief system that glorifies constant productivity, overwork, and busyness, not business, busyness, staying busy, as the path to success, self-worth, and even morality. Oddly enough, like you're a good person if you work hard, you're a bad person if you're lazy. Is any of this hitting home? Yeah, these are kind of links that, especially in American culture, we don't necessarily take apart a lot of the time.
You're working, I'm working, and from now on, full-time, kid.
Hustle culture will also say things like, sleep when you're dead, you're not grinding hard enough. If you really cared, you'd be working 16-hour days. And all of this tends to coalesce together and turn work into your identity, rest into guilt, and success into a finish line that keeps on moving. I mean, how many times have people said, what do you do for work? As like their first get to know you question. Your job becomes your identity. At its core, hustle culture sells the idea that your value is tied to how much you can produce. And if you're not exhausted, you're doing it wrong because you're not living up to your potential. Oh gosh, I just like, the former gifted kid in me is, because honey, living up to my potential. Oh, right in the heart. Here's the problem with all that. It rewards burnout and calls it passion. It makes it feel like you're the problem if you're not thriving on endless work. And it confuses your output with the impact that you're making. Hustle culture had a dubious start. It started in entrepreneurship and tech spaces, and then it oozed into content creation, where I am, freelance life, where I am, and even hobbies, which I don't have because I work too much. Now, everyone feels like they have to be their own brand, their own boss, their own startup, 24/7. Look, at the end of the day, hustle culture is the voice in your head that says, keep pushing, even when you're already doing more than most people. Hustle culture doesn't care if you're happy. It only cares if you're producing. It's funny because I work really, really hard. And until recently, I never really questioned it. I had my dad to look to. My dad was a construction worker, brilliant guy. He worked his way up from a laborer doing something with hot slag, like construction sites. And he became the head mechanical superintendent for a construction company over the years, just working. Dad was always traveling. He'd work 60 or 70-hour weeks. He had shutdowns that he was doing, like mill shutdowns. It was not uncommon for Dad to work on Christmas. Dad was always exhausted. He was always falling asleep on the couch. I didn't really see my dad much growing up. I was always really proud of him though. Like, my daddy worked really hard and my mom did a really good job communicating to us why my dad worked so hard. And he's a heck of a guy. He actually passed away in 2020. He was my hero. I miss him every day. But I grew up poor and they got less poor. They were upwardly mobile, and I have also in my own situation started out very poor and become upwardly mobile, and I think a lot of that is because of that work ethic. So I'm not here to like crap on work ethic and say it's garbage. When you grow up poor, overwork feels normal. And you know, looking at something like my business that I started 8 years ago that's very successful now, when you build something from scratch, it feels like the only way out to work. Like, I worked like a crazy person to build my business. I actually started this business while I still had an office job. I was a manager at a psychological consulting firm. I worked 50, 60-hour weeks. I had a monster commute. I was getting up at 5 a.m. to write and work on my business. I started by doing some books and some blogs at the very beginning. I would get up at 5 a.m. to write and start my day. And I would commute into the office at 7 a.m. because that's when the traffic was bearable, like kind of 6:30, between 6:30 and 7. I get to work early, I would work. I would also work on my lunch breaks for my side hustle. I would either type on my personal laptop or I would dictate on my phone as I was going around on my lunch breaks. I didn't eat at work because I would be working on my side hustle. Then I would dictate work in the car on the way home, the commute that sometimes took 2 hours to get home. I would do that. I'd get home about 7, 8 o'clock at night. And then, I'd be up till about 11 or midnight, and then I'd get up at 5 in the morning. And a lot of times I was working weekends too on the side hustle. I was putting a blog post every day. I was editing my book. I was getting my business up. And I was getting steady income on my business before I went full time, 6 months into the business. So I did them at the same time. And then once I went full time on the business, I worked even more on the business. It was even harder in a lot of ways. So yeah, it was crazy. I am grateful to past self for doing that, especially the 6 months where I was still in my day job and I was doing that. I don't know how she did it. It's all a blur. I don't really have the best memories from that time because I was working so hard. Tells you anything about how difficult it is. But it wasn't sustainable. I had to learn to pace myself. There was actually a point where I almost burnt out completely because it gave me control, it gave me direction, and for a while it actually felt kind of good. But hustle culture doesn't just reward hard work, it worships burnout, and that's where it loses me. So, does that mean I'm anti-hustle? I mean, maybe a little, but let's define what I mean by anti-hustle. I want to clarify that this isn't about laziness or avoidance. I think hard work with intention is always a good thing. I still work really, really hard, okay? But it's different than grind for grind's sake. Creating work, feeling the need to stay busy if there isn't an actual task to do, that's stupid. That's stupid. Or like broadcasting busyness, that's also stupid, right? Work. And I also have found in my business that I have seasons of push. So I started out my business doing a lot of writing. I've also done a lot of e-commerce and merch work. These days I've kind of branched out in the video. I'm having fun there. When I did a lot with books, I had release cycles when a book would come out. When I was doing a promo push, my schedule was crazy during a book launch. Similarly, when I'm launching a new brand and when I'm working with e-commerce, if we go into a different area, if we're expanding, I have crazy cycles where I am barely sleeping and things aren't good because I am trying to do something specific. You could say the same thing with an expansion posture. On YouTube, when you're trying to launch something, when you're trying to build up, there are projects that you are going to work hard for. It's not something you do 90% of the time. It's a 5 to 10% of the time you're in a busy cycle and you want to make sure that you have down cycles as well to recover from busy cycles. Versus like, I always work as hard as possible all the time and that makes me a good person. Like that's basing your identity on overwork is not a good thing. I'm a very busy person, but here's the thing. I'm not against effort. I'm against building a life that collapses if I slow down. Because frankly, sometimes it doesn't happen voluntarily. I had a health scare a few years ago. I haven't talked about this too much, but I had to have major surgery. I think I mentioned my dad passed. There's some cancer and stuff in my family, and I had some really concerning cellular changes, and yeah, I had to get major surgery. I had to get some stuff removed, and I basically dodged cancer when the pathology came back. Also, talking about my dad passed away, actually within like a 2 or 3 year span. My dad passed away, my older sister passed away at 46 of a heart attack. She wasn't even ill. That got in me. My dad had cancer for a while, but that was still hard for different reasons. There's no easy when it comes to death. And I had 4 pets that were elderly. 3 of them all passed during the same cycle. So I had 3 of my pets, my dad and my sister all passed away within just a couple of years. And I had this health scare during it. I kept working through all this, but I had to work at a different pace when all that was happening, right? So it's important as you're kind of constructing things to not to build in a way that everything will collapse if you have to take a break, because sometimes you're forced to slow down. Sometimes things happen. Not to be morbid or whatever, but I learned a thing or two from that. So I'm not big on the hustle culture. And not to be morbid, but I haven't talked much about this on the channel. I don't think I've talked about this on camera. I'll give it a go. If it's too emotional, I can cut it. That's self-compassion to me, but a little something about my sister. So my sister was 46 when she passed. She was only, I'm currently in my mid-40s right now, so we're getting to be the same age. Getting close to the age that my sister was. My sister had a hard life. So I grew up in rural Maine, I've mentioned. I actually moved away at 30 to Ohio, then to Texas, and then I was traveling around in an RV, and now I'm in the PNW. I'll tell you though, I have worked every job under the sun. I was cashier, worked as a hotel maid, been telemarketer, and that's how it is in rural Maine. There aren't a lot of jobs. The cost of living is actually pretty high because it's out there and things need to be shipped in, and the heating costs are very high in Maine. The winters are cold. There's not a lot of jobs. My older sister had stayed there, and she was a single mother. She was a single mother in the Maine woods. She had to do what she had to do to make ends meet. And at the time she passed away, she was working at a dollar store, which, you know, any job is a good job. We need a job. She was working at a dollar store. She actually died at work. Around her coworkers, I feel bad for her coworkers. One, it's super sad. But I remember the night that she passed, my mom called, and we just talked about kind of the stresses. It was horrible. It was horrible. And kind of as the days and weeks went on, some of the stuff that I heard, I'll share one thing with you that really, really got me angry for a while and really kind of changed my impression of a lot of things. So she passed away, and it was actually towards the end of her shift too. Like, couldn't have even been towards the beginning. She passed away at work, and then her employer went to my mother, because my mother was the next of kin. Just found out that my sister had died and that she was going to have to take care of my nephew. She had to deal with going to move my sister's car because her employer said she had to move it or it was going to get towed, and she was going to get hundreds of dollars in fines for towing my sister's car. And my sister was an employee. She'd worked there for a couple of years, and her body wasn't even cold, okay? And they were saying, hey, move your stuff. So especially if you have an employer, especially if you're not working for yourself, it's just like your employer doesn't care about you, not the way you care about your job. Talk about being replaceable and underappreciated. It just gutted me. I actually hate this dollar store chain. I will not shop there. I'm not going to drag them. I don't want to get them coming after me with their lawyers, but it's one that you see in a lot of small towns in the US. So I'm always shaking my fist. They're like my sworn enemy. I hate them because really effing cold, okay? It's just really cold because it's despicable. It's despicable. It's disgusting. My sister was a good person. She had people who loved her, and they're treating her car like trash, treating her memory like trash. So anyway, that was a big thing. I'm glad I can actually talk about that on camera. I feel like I want to cry, but I didn't cry, so I did a good job there. So let's talk about what I choose instead of hustle culture, okay? My actual approach. I do a lot of strategic planning, not constant pushing. So for something like the YouTube channel, I have a content calendar. I have a Trello board for each of my channels. I have outlines, everything all set. I have a schedule for each of the brands. I have filming days on my to-do, something like my e-commerce. I work with colleagues a lot, so I have schedules to touch base with my colleagues. I have a lot of things automated and passive as much as I can in my business. Things like posting repeat content on some of my social media brands. I've carved out that space, right? And importantly, I allow myself some off days. I had years where I didn't take any days off whatsoever. I have times where I will go and I will hide my phone for the evening and just chill. And that is completely different. Like even just having an off night where I'm not on my phone, because I work for myself, I can get emails, texts, messages. I can look at YouTube analytics or shop backends. I can look at data all night if I want to and kind of convince myself that that's time well spent. No, I'll go and disconnect. There's some places where there isn't good signal, not too far from where I live, and it's pretty and there's some outdoorsy stuff, so we'll do that sometimes. We might have like the emergency hiking beacon, but we won't be able to do anything on our phones. And that's great too, because I physically cannot work. So I've done that as well. I do think it's important to know that you don't have to suffer for your work to be valid. You can be having a good time and it can still be good hard work. That's something too. I think there's this weird link that we have between suffering and virtue. I don't know if that's just like the Puritan way or what it is, but it's not one for one. It doesn't make any sense if you think about it. And I think at the end of the day, my big thing is always thinking long-term, thinking about sustainability, not necessarily thinking about how do I get through this hour, this day, this week, but where do I want to be in a year, and kind of working back and finding safe, sane ways to reach my goals. That's huge for me. Look, I still work like hell. I'm not saying I don't work hard. I like hard work, I work hard. But I do so on my terms. Not to prove my worth, not to earn rest, and certainly not to keep up with someone else's definition of success. That's a losing game. Hustle culture will always say more, more, more. I say enough, and on my terms. Anyway, it's been great talking to you as always. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.